Ever heard of the word paradox? I don't like my work, but I love doing it. I don't like my friend, but I love spending time with her. I don't like my husband, but still I love being with him. This is what we call paradoxical behavior. The person I am going to talk about today, she loved politics, but she didn't like the way politics work. She loved Indian constitutional democracy, but she did not like the restrictions democracy imposed on her. She loved institutions like free press, but she did not like the freedom of the press. She loved what she did not like, the first and the only woman prime minister of the largest democracy, Mrs. Indira Gandhi. A paradox of her own, the most controversial ruler India has had. All her contributions to the country were noteworthy. Be it positive or negative, undoubtedly she was very much criticized for the negative marks she made on her country. The moment I hear the name Indira Gandhi, the first thing that comes to my mind is the emergency. But I realized the positive side of her is not being spoken enough. She should also be very much appreciated and respected for the bold decisions she has made as the Prime Minister of India. Remember, criticizing someone for their bad decisions is not disrespecting them. At the same time, appreciating someone for their due share, for their good deeds, it's not whitewashing them. 11 January 1966, Lal Bahadur Shastri, who was the Prime Minister of India, at the same time mysteriously died in Uzbekistan. There was a huge chaos in the country as to who should be the next Prime Minister. The Congress syndicate wanted someone who would be obedient to them, but there were many potential candidates waiting next in line like Morarji Desai, Neelam Sajeev Reddy and S.K. Patel, but Mr. Kamaraja, who was known as the Kingmaker, felt Mrs. Indira Gandhi would be right candidate. He thought she was not too strong and she would need the support of the syndicates to run the country, but little did he know that she was far from being a puppet. Kamaraja used his influence and made most of the chief ministers and eventually all the syndicate members to support Indira Gandhi. With Kamaraja, Indira Gandhi became strong enough to challenge Morarji Desai. It was on 19th January 1966 Indira Gandhi was selected as the Prime Minister of India after a bitter competition with Morarji Desai. But at the same time, Mrs. Gandhi faced a huge backlash from her own party members. She was given names like Gungi Gudiya, which means silent door. Everyone started losing confidence in Congress. They thought Mrs. Gandhi was not a worthy candidate. Maybe it's more like they were not ready to work under a woman. Then how did she become the Indian Prime Minister that we know today? How did she deal with the ideology? How did she become the fearless lady who did not even hesitate to impose emergency? In 1967, several non-Congress parties joined together to bring down the Congress. Even many Congress leaders left the party and joined other parties, but still Congress managed to win the elections, but with the poorest performance ever. Congress lost in 9 states and influential leaders lost their positions. Local parties gained momentum and there were so many new elements in the space of electoral politics. All she was waiting for was the right time to improve herself. She made her first move, a landmark decision, on 19th July 1969 by nationalizing 14 private banks. That was an audacious move, even though people say it was made for her own benefits. It addressed two major problems of her country. First one, from 1947 to 1955, there were 361 banks were falling across the country, which means on an average 40 banks were falling every single year, and that resulted in depositors, common people, losing their money because they were not given any kind of guarantee by the banks. Second one is these commercial banks were seen as catering to large industries and business, and agriculture as a sector was usually ignored by this bank. In 1950, only 2.3% of the bank loans were given to the farmers, and in the upcoming years the situation got even more worse. The motive was to make loans easily available for the common people, like people in agriculture, small scale industries, trades and entrepreneurs, and also on opening new branches in rural and backward areas. Now, why do we think nationalization of banks was a good decision? Number one, before the government nationalized banks, mostly corporate families controlled the banking system in India. After the nationalization, it opened the market for the common people. Number two, before the nationalization, the banks were concentrating only on the urban areas. But after the nationalization that happened, the banks started concentrating even more on the rural and backward areas. As per the RBI records, in 1969, there were 1,833 banks in village areas in our country, and that increased to 33,004 by 1995, thanks to the nationalization. Number 3. Since the government took over the banks, it also got the opportunity to take over the profit that comes out of the banking sector to use on the public welfare. Number 4. Private banks were hesitant to give loan to the agriculture and a small scale industries people, but the nationalization made funds available to all these sectors. But this decision was usually criticized by the Congress syndicate people and also by the opposition party people. She faced opposition both inside and outside Congress. So what Mrs. Gandhi doing was, she effectively took control over the country's financial system and also the financial capital, that is Mumbai, so that she could block off the funding of those people who oppose her, at the same time becoming a hero to those village people, which is the majority in our country. This was a master stroke. This decision made people gain back trust in their government, in their prime minister. But this made the Congress syndicate clearly understand that she was not a Kunki Kudia. So they expelled her from the party, but she made a new party and rose back. Now, what is a Privy Purses? When we got independence, there were several princely states and Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel convinced the rulers of those princely states to join India, and he made them several promises. Significant one of them was to give them a certain amount of money like a pension from the government of India, and this is what we call Privy Purses. The Privy Purse amount was just a small part of India's budget, so proposing its abortion led to a spectacular politics. It was portrayed as a pro-poor and anti-rich measure, which it was. She said the Privy Purses promoted inequality and unfairness in the society, and the financial support provided to Privy Purses was an unnecessary burden on the Indian economy, which I think is a very fair point. And once again, people were highly impressed with Mrs. Gandhi's boldness. But the Privy Purses was a constitution, so to abolish it, the constitution must be amended. So the issue was brought before the parliament, but it failed by one vote. It's funny to mention that a politician from the Tamil Nadu had to continuously use washroom because of his indigestion, so he did not vote. But Mrs. Gandhi did not give up. She approached the President of India and he passed an iconic order that all rulers cease to be recognized as rulers. So there are no rulers anymore. So the government don't have to pay them anymore. But the King of Gwalior filed a case in Supreme Court against this, and the Supreme Court declared President's order unconstitutional. Exactly 12 days after this judgment, she declared that her efforts of working for the poor people is being crushed by the rich and powerful. On this grounds, she sought the 4th Lok Sabha and announced the first elections. She contested the elections with the slogan Garibi Hatao. With this, for the people of India, she became a prime minister who had go to any lengths for the welfare of its people. She was literally being worshipped by the people. In 1971 election, she won in a huge majority, and the citizens of India chose Mrs. Indira Gandhi as their ministers. And in 1971, the bill to abolish Privy Purses was once again proposed, and this time it was passed by the parliament. In a way, this was the beginning of a new era where Mrs. Gandhi's grip over the government as well as the country got strengthened, and challenging her became impossible. Meanwhile, on the other side, there was a huge unrest between the West Pakistan and East Pakistan. And in March 1971, things escalated further when the army of West Pakistan started attacking the local population of East Pakistan. So the East Pakistan declared that they don't want to be a part of Pakistan anymore, and they want a separate country, and they named their country Bangladesh. But the Pakistan army gave a brutal response to this. So the Bangladesh formed an army on its own and started fighting back Pakistan, but they could not win Pakistan. As a result, many Bangladesh left their country. Nearly 90 lakh refugees came to India, At that time, Mrs. Indira Gandhi suggested going to war with Pakistan, but the army chief Sam Bahadur asked her to wait, and she agreed for that. But she knew if India went on a war with Pakistan, that would be a huge international pressure, especially from America. So in the meantime, she started her foreign travels to gather support for our country. The only country who could stand up against the US at that time was Russia. So it made complete sense at that time to join with Russia. So in August 1971, India and the Soviet Union signed a treaty of peace, friendship and cooperation. Once again, a strong move by 3rd December 1971. The Pakistani Air Force first hit India at the Bhuj Air Force Base at night, and that's how the war began. She cut off all supplies of military forces of the Pakistani ships in Indian Ocean. At the same time, there was a huge debate happening in the UN Security Council. America obviously supported Pakistan, but USSR stood with India and did not any resolution pass against India. The Pakistan army was completely surrounded by Indian army, and they also faced a huge shortage of food and weapon supplies. And within just 14 days of the war, Pakistan had to surrender. This was a historic win, and an army of 93,000 soldiers were made to surrender in such a short span of time. And this has never happened before in the whole world since the world wars. I agree she has committed grave mistakes which have literally paralyzed our country for so long. But I felt she should also be appreciated for showing such integrity and courage to take bold decisions in a complete man's world.